Okay, meeting will come to order. New business, application, Jack Shear, property owner, Jack Shear, 29 Jones Avenue, Chatham, New York, 12037. Reason for denial by a code enforcement officer is, and I'm going to go through the whole list of that. And we have application to subdivide, I believe. And I'm going to ask you to give us a little background on what we have to do as planning board, because we don't do that often.
No.
Did you give us something at one time? Because I looked high and low, I swore you had given us something that the county required for a subdivision, but not for a lot line adjustment. And I looked high and low in all my paperwork, I could not find it.
That's possible.
I mean, like I remember something, and I'm sorry, something like 5 copies of this, so many of this, and so much of that, and whatever else. And I was just curious if you had done that.
I don't remember doing that.
That may be combining 2 parcels.
I think it was.
Yeah, and if you're combining things, there's really nothing at all.
Right.
But when you're changing lines, it's a different story. But anyway, here you're talking about a subdivision. You've got a single parcel you want to put into 2 pieces. As you know, the village has no subdivision law. So there is a limited amount of stuff that is in the New York State village law about subdivisions, and but it's in the absence of a village law governing it, it's pretty vague. So, I mean, there are I mean, the first place is there's this law empowering a village to create a planning board, and for various purposes, the village board of trustees made a resolution to authorize and empower the planning board to approve plats of subdivisions showing lots, blocks, or sites within that streets or highways. A lot of the language of this is addressed to what this law is really primarily about, which is like big, expansive subdivisions where people are having lots of parcels and streets and all kinds of stuff. So an awful lot of it is written to address that kind of stuff. It doesn't really have a heck of a lot to do with taking a piece and cutting it into 2. Anyway, Des and Sam did manage to find the resolution creating the planning board from 1968. But it doesn't really specifically get into subdivisions. But there's other, they're in connection with the statutes, there are what they call these practice commentaries, which are expert guidance on the application. It does say, it's actually a little contradicting. One is that a municipality doesn't have to have a subdivision law, and doesn't have to require anyone to come to review at all. But it's taking it for the moment that it does. So I think this is the village law section 7730, which I'll get to, provides substantive requirements for approval of subdivision plats. It's also a case with village law 7-728. The standards set forth in village law 7730 are self-contained. In other words, no further action is required by a board of trustees or planning board in order for a planning board to review subdivision plats in accordance with the standards of village law 7730. This says, however, because the standards of village law 7730 are general, subdivision regulations may be employed by a planning board to specify exactly what is required. But this is where there isn't any. There are no local regulations about subdivisions, and so there's a limited set of requirements that apply generally to subdivisions. And one is that the subdivision has to comply with zoning code. So in this case, there are lot size, the village zoning code does have specifications about lot sizes and since there's a building on one, already setbacks in there, and pointed out it complies with those, they're both big enough. They both fit all the dimensional requirements. Where the line is drawn, the existing building would be set back from the side, at least to required amount. So it's not, the proposed subdivision conforms to the specifications in the zoning code. And then it goes on, says the planning board, it says, the plan is to require the land shown on the plat to be of such character that it can be used safely for building purposes without danger to health or peril from fire, flood, damp, or other menace. And then it says, and this is where you're really getting into these large subdivisions, it says the plan board should also require that the streets and highways be of sufficient width and suitable grade and to be suitably located to accommodate the prospective traffic, to afford adequate light and air, facilitate fire protection. Suitable monuments be placed at block corners and other necessary points. This is what you're talking about, so there's very little that really has much bearing on this. There is one thing that may come up as a concern, which is the only one that really came up is whether there's a sewer connection to it. If it's cut, do the sewer, the village sewer mains extend far enough to, or water mains extend far enough down Jones Avenue to access this parcel? That's something we have to look at.
The sewer in the existing building goes toward the front, towards Jones Avenue and Oswald Street. You're the neighbor, right, in the back?
I'm the neighbor in the back,
Yeah,
yes,
so
yes. We have private,
So that's
private
on a
sewer,
septic
private
system.
well, yeah.
So it could be on a septic system or make a connection in where the Jones Avenue extension is, which I'm assuming you could have if you paid for it or whatever, did it?
There might have been something, I don't remember, yeah.
I mean, there's the creek between, so that would be a concern, but that parcel, the vacant parcel would be accessible from the front of the creek, the north side.
Okay. I mean, we're going to go into more detail on this. This is the first meeting, so you're just kind of making a presentation. Then we have to set a public hearing on it for the next meeting, and we'll have to accommodate things. But we could have you all look at all the details, but there's really not much. But I think the sewer is one question that you want to, I don't need to establish either that you're going to be able to connect to water and sewer,
There's enough room for a septic, traditional septic system.
or that you have, with the creek or any other things that you actually can put in, you can get a well and a sewage disposal or septic system. But that I think is going to be the primary issue that falls within the scope of the review here is, one way or another, you're going to be able to provide water service to it and waste disposal from it. But realistically, there's very little else in here. In the absence of a code that gets into more specificity, there's not a heck of a lot. There's not, one parcel, you're not really putting, demands on things that are kind of the subject of this kind of stuff, so.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Going to be dividing it into two separate parcels. Now, I realize that that parcel right now is in a residential zone, and that the one building obviously is not a residential building, but it's grandfathered because it was there before the zoning was in. But I'm assuming now, if we do separate it to make a separate plot, that would then be considered residential?
Yeah. And that would just be subject to all of the district
It's still all residential. What ended up happening a while back, when actually you or Jack Shear came here and indicated the fact that there would be a change in use for the existing structure.
Yeah.
And the board approved of that change in use. And that change of use was going from a medical arts building to an office building office space, of which at that time we were told the Shaker Museum would be
Correct.
in conjunction with that. And we simply approved
They actually got a use
the
variance.
non-conforming use.
So actually, it's a very unusual thing. They actually did get approval for a use variance, which is very, very demanding. And the reason that it was granted was because there was a existing building that was built out for certain configurations, and it was, they had to provide economic data and other information to show that it was economically not feasible to convert that building in its configuration into a residential thing, and which is the thing, one of the things you have to do. Use variance is a very, very difficult thing to get, but they actually did show the numbers that it would require so much demolition, reconstruction, this and that, that the board at the time, a few years ago, agreed to grant them a use variance, which allowed them to use it as an office building. That only applies to to that existing thing. So yes, you're now.
It's only still residential.
This would become a lot subject to, the standard rules for the district. And only the uses that are permitted in that district would be allowed to go there, which, I can read what they are.
But
I don't think that's necessary, because at this point, I guess it's okay now that we can start taking a look at the application. And
can I
then,
ask one more question?
sure,
Do you know what the requirements are of the Columbia County Planning Board Department in terms of what they need to receive? Or is it the property?
It's just the county clerk.
Okay, what about the real property department?
Well, that's the same thing. It goes,
Okay.
they file, when you do a subdivision, you gotta file a plat with the county clerk, so that the real property department will now know that there's a new, they have to assign it a parcel ID and such.
Right.
And that's why,
But
they
do we
need, and they need an approval from the municipality, so.
But do we know what they need? I mean, that's my question is, I don't want to see our board approving a subdivision and approving something that does not contain all the necessary documents that the county real property needs. So my question is, we would benefit from the aspect of knowing what the county real property required for a subdivision.
That's just information for them to generate based on the fact that you approved the parcel to be divided.
Right, but they may need things that we need to know about in order to make that approval.
Well, they need a stamped and signed plat that shows, like a survey that shows what it is. They don't need much else. They just have to be able to identify the parcel. But they don't need information about infrastructure, they just need the parcel plat that shows them. I think they need a couple of copies of it, but.
So I guess all I was hoping was the fact that you could get for the board for, in this particular case and in future cases, what they wanted, so we could make sure that we had whatever they wanted. Now, if it's only just a copy of the survey, or it's 5 copies of the survey,
That's basically what it is.
Then-
I'm not sure the number, but that's sort of
Okay.
what we need, yeah.
but I mean, just a confirmation from
Okay.
would be helpful to have, so that we know, both for this case and in future cases, what they're really looking for. And they may have changed things recently, or they may be what they've been for a long time, but it would be helpful.
I never handle these, I do subdivisions like in other towns frequently. The planning board does them all the time, and it's people come in with their surveys. I mean, we go through the process, but as far as the actual filing, I don't personally handle the filing. The applicant does, but they bring in survey with the subdivision drawn on it and all, it's just like what you've got.
They have it,
Yeah, and in the end, it's approved, the planning board stamps it, signs it, gives a couple copies. So it's nothing unusual. I just don't know how many, I don't remember how many they do because I don't do the filing, but it's nothing out of the ordinary. It's just it's a survey map.
Okay, and again, like I said, just to confirm that that's all they're looking for. It's just a copy of the survey that's stamped by the board and the number of copies that they need.
Okay. So, at that point, I think we look at the application. I will tell you at the beginning, we have a letter here of authorizations for Eric Gaylord to speak on behalf of the owner of the property. So, Eric. So, I'm assuming everybody has a copy of,
Yeah, of what, of Jack's approval?
and that.
I have it. Here it is. Oh, now, yeah, we got that.
Any questions from the board members?
I had a question on the map, on the notes, on number 5. Parcel surveyed without benefit of, and is subject to the review of a complete and up-to-date abstract of title. I'm not sure what,
That just means that there will be a title search to make sure there's clear title on the parcel before being divided.
before we divide it.
Which would fall on and benefit the owner to do that. Which he already owns it, so nobody's buying it, so it's already clear. If this was for purchase or sale, that would be different. As far as title search.
Okay, but shouldn't that have been done first?
It was done when he purchased the property.
Done when he purchased the property? When was that?
Whenever there's a real estate transaction that happens, and he purchased it 2013, 2012, something like that.
Okay.
I'm guessing that it was April 21st, 2015. Because it says date information, book number, page number, dated.
That might be when we had the survey, but Ellsworth died in 2015, so it was before that.
Okay.
It was 2 or 3 years before.
Yeah,
I just wanted to make
dated
sure
April 21st, 2015.
Your questions, I don't know.
Yeah.
So that could be
I got my question answered, so it's going to become.
the first survey after, I know he already owned it when we had it surveyed. So I think he owned it 2 years or so before that survey.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, I just want to also point out, just for future reference, there are 3 sewer locations. One is right at the little triangle at Off Street, Off and Cottage Street.
Those sewer or manhole covers? Or,
If I could read this better, it
Yeah.
says something sewer.
Yeah, man.
I couldn't, I had.
Just a, oh, it's a manhole cover?
Sanitary sewer.
Thank you.
Being curious, we have the creek going through, and then there's a little line here of something. What's,
Fine, that's fine.
this little line right here, is that
I think it was
That's a
contour.
seasonal stream.
is that a seasonal stream? Okay.
Yeah, it is.
As I looked at it, I could see it's getting something, but it's too small.
And then this is the.
Your turn.
I have some questions regarding, the general questions I had were answered, and I appreciate they were, well, the current status of the building, which is currently unoccupied, or is there currently somebody in it?
It's occupied, it's being occupied.
It is being occupied? Oh, okay, I thought it was,
It's just outfitted with office equipment.
Are people working out of the building?
No.
There's an office in there, but it's not.
Okay. My questions had to do with the survey itself.
Okay.
The survey written on the side of the drawing says that the property owner of the survey is Jones Avenue Chatham LLC.
Yes.
Okay. However, the paperwork we have says that it's Jack Shear is applicant property owner. Okay. We had this discussion once before with the building on Main Street that there's two different aspects. Now, you end up in a case that we need something like we needed before that indicated that this particular LLC, that Jack Shear is the owner.
That was a slightly different case, but I understand what you're saying.
He's the owner and the majority owner. If he's not,
It's the owner.
Okay,
It's
well,
the
okay.
sole, is that required?
I mean, it should, yeah, there should be something that just, an LLC document that names him as a member or authorized to act.
okay, but
We'll have it for the next meeting.
and that's what that's what I'm saying, because the survey is made out to that company,
Yeah, that makes sense.
and that's who the survey is valid to. It's not valid to anybody else but that company. And if
No,
you-
you don't.
Okay, all right.
The applicant should be, has to be the owner, so it's
Okay.
just a simple document that shows that he's
Understood.
Okay.
executed on that.
The survey that we have, or drawing we have, has been reduced from the scale indicated on the drawing, which is 1 inch is 30 feet, to a scale that can be scaled or confirmed. It's,
Your dimensions are on there, what do you need to know?
well, when I get to the next aspects, okay, okay.
Excuse me.
The other thing on this survey is that the drawing does not have a surveyor's seal and/or signature.
It's because you haven't approved it.
No,
If I need to move the lines, then it needs a seal.
we need to know that this is accurate for us to make a decision for approval. There's nothing for us to know that this is an accurate document if the surveyor has not put his seal and signature on it. If in fact it requires alteration, then that would be a revision on the thing. But now, I'm looking at a document, as the other members of the board are, that has no real legitimacy because it does not have the surveyor's seal and date on it. Seal and signature on it.
Again, on
Hey,
that
you're
pen,
gonna- You will need that for the final.
For the
approval.
final.
I mean, I think,
But how do we,
well, because, I'm saying, in this case, the numbers are on there. They're describing it as having, you know, the boundary line 20 feet from the building and so many, you know, the numbers are on there. And so you can work on that, you can work off of that. And then at the end, they're gonna have this, you know, if those are good in those locations, then the surveyor can, you know, essentially sign off of them. They also, to file with the county, you're gonna need full-size things. So they're gonna have to bring in full-size surveys.
but in the past, in documents like this that we've looked at, the seal and the signature have been on the document that we reviewed because that is the document that we're reviewing and approving so that it can be
The
subdivided.
thing that's gonna be signed, if the planning board approves it and stamps and signs off on it for filing, it's gonna be something with the surveyor's signature and.
So why can't the copy we are looking at now have the seal and signature on it?
It could, but as I said,
Well,
And- okay.
we're not gonna continue to pay this guy for stuff that if we need adjustments or whatever, so we.
Well, nothing's been mentioned about adjustments. If we get to the end of this, it doesn't require adjustments, okay. Okay, the other thing which I had written down here, the survey does not show the village boundary line. That's right, the village zoning map appears to show that of Lot 2, there may be a portion that's not within the village. And if you pull out the zoning map and you look and see where it comes up, it leaves a bit of question as to whether the village line, all of Lot 2 is within the village line. And if it's not all within the village, then it becomes an issue as to whether in fact, here's your survey. And here's where this thing comes across, the village line, past into here someplace. If you look here at this, this is where these streets come together. And they come together back here. Which may lead one to believe that the village line is someplace here. And that this part here is not in the village.
It looks like a little bit of it may be in Ghent.
Right. And so I don't see, I'm looking at this right here. Okay. Here's your parcel right here. Okay, and here's this road
Do you have any?
right here.
Yeah,
Yeah, you do.
And here's where this road matches into Austin.
like Jeff's.
Right here.
Yeah.
And if you look at this, here's where they come together. And the line leads you to believe it's back here, the village line. And then, so there may be a portion of this parcel that is not within the village.
Oh, wait a minute.
You don't know that?
I'm in town of Chatham, so, and then, like,
Some of it,
Yeah.
not much of it.
yeah.
But two
So
towns.
all I'm saying is, this is something that would need to be clarified, because we couldn't approve alone the subdivision so that Lot 2 was created and granted if part of it's in the town of Ghent,
It would be town of Chatham.
or town of Chatham.
Chatham,
Okay.
yeah.
What is in the town of Chatham?
See, I think that is in this.
It does look like a line
Well,
like
some
this,
of
somewhere
it-
like that.
Yeah,
They start shading it.
right.
But I don't think that would affect your decision.
Well, it would affect our decision is because then we'd be granting a subdivision
And I-
for another municipality.
It's already there.
It wouldn't, we wouldn't be doing that, but the issue would be that you would,
And my question is, if it is partially in the town of Ghent or Chatham, and not all in the village, don't we have to notify their planning board so if it,
That's my point. Is it that this would be a subdivision of a piece of property in a
i.e. the price chopper, we had to be notified because part of that's in the village of Chatham and there was a debate as to who should be the lead agents.
Okay, so that's,
I'm assuming we would be the lead agency because the majority of us in the village, it just as in the price chopper, the town of Ghent is the lead agency.
the other question I had in relation to the survey. And this does go where you might require alterations or additions, is that on lot 1, the parking lot that's on the left side of the building, as I went back to say about the survey not being scalable any longer, it shows no dimensions of the overall lot size. It has no indication of the number of parking spaces within there, or the size of the spaces. Now, I realize that the building inspector provided some information.
You tell me.
I have no idea at all how she came up with that, because
Slow down. What exactly what parking lot are you referring to?
I'm referring to the parking lot which was identified on the left side of the building, which is on the
Left
north,
is north,
the north.
The
Okay.
Cottage Street side, right?
which is long existing.
I understand that,
Okay,
but you end up in a case, when you subdivide the lot,
yeah,
we have to make sure that that lot still complies with the zoning.
not for, it's commercial.
It still has to comply with the zoning.
We gotta make sure it's got enough parking spaces, got enough.
It's like the setbacks, you identified the setbacks are okay.
Okay.
But the number of parking spaces, based on the building, needs to be identified.
Same spaces that were always.
Okay, but there may not be enough now, because you had parking behind the back.
During.
You had parking behind the back of the
during
building.
our last time, when we went for the use variance, it was noted during those meetings that there is less impact, less traffic, and less parking.
Well, the original use showed this whole big area in the back of the building as parking. That is no longer part of lot 1, and there's no parking
That
back
was
there.
not included.
That's
The
not,
parking lot did not exist when we did the use.
yes it did. I've parked in that parking lot hundreds of times.
It wasn't, okay,
So I mean,
take that back, but we were talking about the front, the only paved parking lot, the only parking lot that really counts with the building. That has been existing since 1966.
well, you may have been talking about that. But the point being is, when it came to meeting the parking requirements for that use, there was all this parking shown on the back, on the right-hand side of the building, which was identified as parking, in the area that we're talking about now on the left side. And that was all parking for that use, when that use was changed. Now, when you're subdividing the lot, we've eliminated all that parking that was on the one side of the building.
Do you know what that density is?
Can look it up.
If I can.
The parking
If
requirement,
we pull the plans at the time of the use variance, it should have the number.
It just came up a couple times, it might have the number, I mean, I can go count or whatever, but I'm just wondering what the density is. I mean, it could be a very simple question
Yeah.
to answer. But that came up, that was part of the change. Was that-
but the change was all one lot, one big parcel of land. You're
The
eliminating,
point is, it was less impact, so I know it'll meet the requirement. That's
But it's not
I'm
impact.
not arguing.
Everybody, one at a
It's
time,
less
please.
Yes.
All right, the use of an office space, the use of the building as an office space requires a certain number of parking.
2 to 4 per 1,000 gross square foot.
Huh?
2 to 4 parking spaces per
That's
1,000.
residential.
No, that's not, that's
Yeah. Offices,
non-residential.
2 to 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area.
Right.
What is the gross floor area of the building?
Well, we don't know. I know that,
It's 5,367 square feet of the existing office space.
but how did the building inspector come up with that? That's my question. There's no information, there's no dimensions on the building.
Well, she looked it up apparently. I mean,
From what?
If
It's-
I might,
it's in
so
the
we can end this discussion, the closest thing that I could find as far as guidelines for us to be able to use this is the application for site plan approval, because eventually if you're going to approve this, probably going to need the site plan anyway. So in there, it says location, type of construction of all parking and truck loading areas, showing access and egress, type and volume of traffic, i.e. it says you have to have. So we need a map that shows that.
So-
The other thing that I would also suggest is that this recommends that a map that eventually will be needed, that will be on the scale of 20 feet to 1 inch.
A map of what?
On a scale of 20 feet to 1 inch for that application.
Oh.
So that we can have a big enough map so we can see what's going on.
If we have a map that's 1 to 30, which is what the surveyor's already done, but we have a full-size drawing, and we have a drawing with a seal and signature on it, so we know that this, what we're reviewing reflects what the surveyor
Okay.
has
I
put down.
understand, but I also don't want to go down rabbit holes with lots of questions. So what is actually valid in, what am I supposed to actually answer for the next meeting?
Now,
And that's
Because
what-
if you do rough math, even the maximum amount of cars of 4 per thousand to 5,000 square feet, that's 20 cars. The front lot will hold 30 to 40 cars.
No, I disagree with you. I did my best to try to figure out, there's no dimensions on that lot, okay? So
Okay.
there's no way to determine how many parking spaces. I know the building inspector put down something, and what she put down,
But even if it's 2, it's 10 cars. It'll hold 10 cars.
what you end up having to understand is, because you're dividing it into 2 lots, the lot that has the building on it, based on the zoning, has to comply with the zoning.
Okay.
You comply with the zoning in terms of the setbacks, okay?
Yeah.
Which is what you've
I
done.
understand.
But the question is, do you comply with the building in terms of parking lot spaces?
Yes, we
Okay.
do. So how much
Well-
of that do I have to prove?
So you have,
Like, I know what
survey-
you want.
the
but
survey,
what do I have
okay.
to prove.
What you're gonna need in the end is a full-size survey map.
Understood.
On that survey map, the parking lot that is gonna continue to serve the existing building needs to be clearly surveyed on there
Okay,
with its dimensions.
okay.
The parking spaces should be marked, so you can plainly look at that and see that there are 20 spots, whatever. So the surveyor should indicate the parking lot and how many, and, you know, given the size, required size for each space, you know, how they mark out. So that should be on there.
Will I be provided with a list of these things, or should I
You
be?
should recommend that. We're gonna be, actually, we should probably provide it so that everybody has the same sheet at the end.
and that's what I
Okay.
tried to do with what we're requesting tonight.
So you'll need that. The surveyor should identify whether or not the village line bisects that second lot, if any of it's in the other town, outside the village. So that, the village line should be marked on there.
Okay.
Seal,
Huh?
a sealed signature. Should,
Yeah, in the end, yes.
But you say in the end, and I understand what you're saying, but without his seal and signature on there, we have no legal basis to know that this is actually accurate. When the surveyor puts his seal and signature on it, he's certifying that the dimensions and information on here are accurate to the best of his ability as a licensed professional.
Yeah, I'm just saying, sometimes it's a practical matter. If he submits the same thing at the end, you know, if you,
But we won't see what he submits at
yes,
the
you
end.
will, because that's what you're gonna sign.
We will not
You're
approve
gonna-
until we have that.
The thing you're gonna sign off on in the end, you're physically gonna put a stamp on it, and the chairman's signature is going to have the surveyor's
Okay,
stuff.
if that's the case. okay.
So, I mean, as long as, if they come in with one, I mean, to be honest, if he's doing all the work, you might as well sign it, but, because you're gonna wanna see a full-size one. But if it was a working thing, and, you know, you approve it in the meeting, they've gotta come in with the exact same thing, the exact same version, just with a stamp on it, so I mean, you guys might as well just sign it.
As long as we're good with these parcel dimensions, I can do that.
And then the other thing, if the surveyor's doing the lot, parking lot, which is needed, can the square footage of what, the gross square footage of the building be put on there? Because that dictates the number of parking spaces.
That's on the village record. That's-
But it's not on this drawing. And you end up in a case that what's happened in the past with the property happened in the past. This is the document we're looking at now. Just like we said with the parking, you need to put down the number of spaces, the size of the spaces, the overall aspect of what the lot width is. And the spaces should reflect the fact that there's a handicap space someplace in there, because you're gonna need one by law. But the building, then gross square footage of the building, then dictates whether there's enough parking on the property. So it's no more than simply saying that the surveyor puts in here on this drawing what the gross square footage is of the building, just like he did with the gross square footage of each lot. So that then the board can confirm, based on a licensed professional's signature, that that's what the square footage is, and then calculations can be made as to what the number of parking spaces are required. Then we can determine whether the lot is okay to be subdivided.
You can also pull the approval from the other one, because the board would have, probably, I think, would have made a determination of how, at that time, like when you're converting to an office building, the specific number that they wanted. So that should be, that would probably have been,
And I totally agree with you.
but if that was done, then, like, if the board said, you're actually gonna, because there's not, it says 2 to 4, so if the board said you need 12, let's just say, then that's all they need. And so I think we should go back, and find, and pull the most recent thing with because the board may have actually, would probably have said you need a specific, this number, You're not going back to de novo and saying you need 2 to 4, and let's figure out how many you need. When they got that permission to do it as an office building, part of the thing presumably would have been, and to do that, you need this specific number of parking spaces.
Okay.
Which had already been set.
And that may be the case.
We should pull,
But you do end up in a case that that's when it was all one parcel, and there was,
No, but that's irrelevant.
Okay.
If they, what I mean is, if it was determined at the time by the board that it's gonna be an office space, you need 12 parking spaces, and they have 12 parking spaces on the front side of the building, then they're done, then you don't need any of the rest of this stuff. We're not going back, if the number of parking spaces that was required for the office building was already determined and dictated as part of granting the use variance, you don't have to recalculate how many parking spaces are required. You just have to make sure that that number of parking spaces are still on the parcel. So,
If I hear you correctly, what you're saying is, if the building requires a certain number of parking spaces, it's the same now as it was back then. The only difference that we might be looking at is, okay, you can always, and I'm making it, the parking lot cannot be more than so many percentage of the whole lot.
well, there's that, but also,
That would be a different story now, because it's a different.
well, also at
size
the
lot.
time, let's just say, hypothetically, they said you need 12 spaces, and the lot on the front of the building or the left, depending on what you call it, has at least 12 spaces, then they're fine. If it said that they needed 20 spaces and there are 14 on that side and there are 6 behind the building, then they don't comply anymore. So I'm saying, assuming that at the time of this use variance, a specified number of parking places was required, that's the number of parking places that are still required. You don't have to recalculate how many. All you have to do is figure out
That you
if
have
they're still there.
and I understand that.
So
That
we should pull out. I mean, it's possible that wasn't specifically addressed because there was a lot of space around it, but that's,
You know what's ironic about this? You have a 180 seat theater with 2 parking spaces in front of it. But okay.
So the information, the minutes and information that was submitted that will indicate the parking will be provided to all the board members, so that we can review it and understand it?
I mean, it should be in the
Part of the
file.
application.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm simply,
If I can, part of your application, if you would please, is to have in that application the previous information that said how much parking spaces, if that was in there.
And that's for me to find?
that's why I'm not looking at you, and I
it should
shouldn't
be
be
the file.
looking at you. The building inspector should provide for the board all the background, all the information that's related to when this parcel, that building was changed in use, okay? So that we have all of it, so there's any questions about it. Because maybe that will, and I go back to the aspect of what the gross floor area is of the building, maybe that will indicate what it is. But if it's not, then it's something we should have. Because if the parking happens to be a case that it wasn't identified as a specific number, or part of it was in the front, part of it was in the back in terms of the number, then we would have to determine, have to know what that gross square footage was, so we then could determine whether there was adequate parking based.
And it seems we have it on the record, because Aaron had a very specific number down to the square foot. It was like 5734 or something like that.
But I don't know where she got it from.
Well, I don't know for
So
sure.
we'll know that if we get the,
Every property has a file and a tax base that shows how many units, how many square foot. I mean, it's all on her record. And you're asking me to double check that.
I'm asking the surveyor to put on
It's
here.
the same building.
It is the same building, but do you want to end up coming here for the next meeting and ending up, we found out that the parking was not identified, and now we have to make a determination as to how much parking you need? We don't know what the square footage of the building is because it's not on the document we have in front of us? I'm trying to protect you so that we don't end up dragging this thing on forever. By having the surveyor include what the square footage is on here and the information about the parking, and us getting the other
guess I'm just asking, so Aaron's word isn't good enough, you want it on there from the surveyor?
Well, Aaron isn't making the approval, the planning board is making the approval. I appreciate what Aaron has done, okay? I don't mean that. But you do end up in a case that we are the ones that are legally responsible for approving the subdivision. I don't know about the other board members, but I don't want to make an approval on something that I don't have the information clear in my mind and where it came from to make that approval. And this whole thing may not be is not really a big issue, shouldn't be a big issue. Okay, it's just adding a few more information and providing a survey that's of a size that one can read and scale from.
So we're gonna give him a list of what he needs.
Yes. Making the list.
Yeah, what I'm doing is highlighting, I'll
So far, I have that he needs a document showing Jack Shear's owner of Jones Avenue, Chatham LLC, a survey map, full size and scalable, that shows parking lot dimensions, parking spaces clearly marked, including handicap spaces, the location of the village line, specifically to show whether or not it bisects the second lot, and if there's any overlap outside of the village. Village line clearly denoted to understand how the parcels fall relative to boundary lines. The gross square footage of the building needs to be signed and stamped by the surveyor by the final meeting. And the village will look at the old application to see how many parking spaces were determined by the board at the time to be required for the last application. And whatever that requirement was, will,
If that came up.
if that came up.
I mean, I remember some details of that meeting, but I don't remember that being an issue, or coming up.
I don't remember either because we knew that there was
And
plenty of parking.
that was before, that was the zoning board.
Well, so
Yes, it
we'll
was.
see where it was.
Right, especially, I mean, the use variance was.
Yeah. I don't remember that part.
That's what I have so far.
Anything else from board members?
I have one quick question, I don't know if this is relevant or not. On number 13 on the application, the short environmental assessment form. Number 13 is any portion of the site of the proposed action or lands adjoining the proposed action contain wetlands or other water bodies regulated by a federal, state, or local agency. There is a stream. Who regulates that? Do we know who regulates that, and whether it matters?
It would be on a state classification map, but it's runoff, so
It's
I
runoff.
didn't bother to look because it's runoff.
Is it runoff or a seasonal stream?
Seasonal, yeah,
It's-
seasonal runoff comes down
it's-
the hill.
Yeah, but some streams, and I'm not sure, some streams are seasonal,
Right, well,
but are not just simply runoff.
Well,
The groundwater table allows the water to run down the creek, and then at times it dries out. It would not be a federal issue, it would only be a DEC aspect in terms of seasonal streams, and I don't really know enough about that in terms of regulated or not regulated.
It doesn't really have much bearing on the subdivision because you're not, all you're doing is drawing a property line.
Yeah,
Because,
So that,
yes, part of it is within the lot number 2.
yeah, but I'm saying, all you're doing right now is considering a subdivision, which is just redrawing the lines. That becomes a lot more relevant if someone's
Put something.
gonna put something there.
Okay.
And it may impact the water, but changing the line doesn't actually have any effect on that. So if someone were gonna put a building there, I mean, because remember, this EAF is the same form for everything. I mean, there's a long form and a short form, but the questions try to encompass all kinds of stuff. So a lot of them don't really have much bearing on the subdivision, where all you're doing is drawing a line.
Does this
And that's-
require a C?
It is.
It does?
Yeah, because again, Well, in the first place it is. What other towns, both other towns that I've worked in, we have done is adopt as a type 2 action, which means something that does not require seeker, is a simple subdivision of one parcel into two. Again, it's designed more for these big things where you're cutting up land into a lot of pieces. But there's no technical exemption from seeker. But there is a thing in seeker that says every agency, the planning board being one, can adopt its own list of type 2 things that it is determined will not have significant adverse environmental impacts. So, you know, instead of other planning boards have said, look, if you're just taking one parcel and cutting into 2 conforming lots, we don't need to do this.
Okay,
But we haven't done that here because we
did.
never do it, huh?
we did. On June 24th,
So we did?
2024, we passed a resolution that designates certain minor subdivisions and boundary line adjustments as type 2
Okay.
actions under seeker.
Okay.
Then we put down, now therefore be it resolved that the planning board of the village of Chatham designates the following to be type 2 actions for the purpose of the planning board review, and therefore not subject pursuant to seeker. The subdivision of a single conforming lot into 2 conforming
I
lots.
forgot we did it here, okay.
Okay,
We did
so-
it here. All right. We just have a few of them, I forgot.
Right,
So we don't really need the seeker.
You don't need it.
Good, because then I have to tell you that it wasn't signed.
So this is not needed.
Okay.
Wasn't signed?
No. There's a section where you put the person's name, and then there's a place where you're supposed to sign it underneath that, and this title.
Yes.
I didn't
Right.
have them sign it because I had the
But you don't have to worry because the one you...
other thing, the authorization.
Okay. This is the other thing I could have had you do if we needed, I could have had you put it down. Anything else?
You're gonna set a public hearing on this for next month?
That was my next thing, is I believe that the correct procedure now is to table this for 30 days and have a public hearing at the next meeting.
Yep. I think so.
Do you want,
A motion.
no, do you want any comments?
That would be the public
We
hearing.
have to wait for that?
Yeah.
We can't, okay. Okay.
You should get the papers in 10 days ahead of that.
So
Papers
what I
need to
need
be-
is a motion to table for 30 days and have the public hearing at the next meeting.
I make a motion that we table these subdivision approval until the next meeting, or until such time as the applicant provides the information requested,
And we have a
10 days prior to the subsequent meeting,
table it, and then we will have a...
and then we'll have a public hearing.
Okay.
I'll
You
second.
do, materials for public hearings do have to be in by 10 days ahead, so make sure you get them into the clerk or the...
Understood.
So, my question to the board is, any further discussion on the motion that's in front of us? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All three vote positive. Now, it is my general practice, you don't have to do this, to ask the general public if they would like to make a comment. Well,
Oh, we're the general public. No, I mean, we're both abutters, so I don't know. I was just curious.
I will tell you that it would make more of a statement at the next meeting where we're having the, but we always ask just to be polite, let you have a, you don't have to do that.
I think the only thing that wasn't on the list was the water and sewer situation. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, Kelly Bancroft. Did you want to
having
say something?
done
All right.
that,
Is
Oh.
it, I just have two little questions, and if they're not appropriate, just tell me.
okay.
Is this for residential, this
It would
second
have
one?
to be, yeah.
Okay.
The new property would be residential.
It's, but the
And how
point,
is, oh, sorry.
I can tell you that the point was to keep it wild, not build a house.
Not to build a house on it?
I mean, anything could happen
Right.
if something happens to Jack or whatever, however that transfers after his demise. But
Okay.
I don't,
From what you're saying, I'm guessing is that if, say, something should happen to Jack, it would be easier for somebody to, if it was not done,
it's,
to make it
Yeah, well, actually
But now
more
it's separate, two separate
restrictive
pieces.
with, it's possible that the museum could come to the board and build another building behind it, or, you know, for storage or other things that the museum might be looking for.
That would be pretty hard.
It would be, but it's not impossible.
It's not
and-
impossible, I'll tell you why it's a
And
lot
this-
harder, because it's a vacant, it's an empty lot. So you would have to.
No,
prove-
if it stayed one parcel,
Oh, it stays one parcel.
that's, so we're restricting that essentially.
Making it harder for them to do what we would
So
want
in
to
the
do.
So it's
residential
just
zone, you basically,
the little building that it
permitted,
is.
the permitted things, I mean, there are a variety of residential uses. There are special permit, you know, depending on the parcel.
We'll cross that bridge when we get there.
There are a few other things that aren't residential.
My second question, if I may, is, that parcel, how is that zoned? Is it,
That's
like one
residential.
house per, yeah, but is it like
It's
one?
zone residential, and the residential use table would have to be looked at in terms of what the square footage is required per lot. But I
10,000
can,
square feet.
It would be, any residential property is all zoned the same, so that.
Okay, thank you, that's all I needed to know, I
So
wasn't
it
sure.
would be residential.
Residential,
And it would be 10,000 square feet if it's in the village. And if it's like 50,000 square feet.
technically, you could build more than one
Yeah.
residential structure on that piece of property.
125,000 square feet.
Yeah.
But the way it actually lays out, there's no way you could do that.
it's not, yeah, okay. All righty. You
Okay?
good? Okay.
So
Thank you
having
so
done
much.
that, I have no other business, new business on the agenda. Opinion of the planning board for new applicants to the ZBA, we have none. Approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, which was in December of 16, 2024.
Yeah.
To approve those minutes.
The list.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of December 16th, 2024. Does anybody, well, I mean,
I second it.
It's kind of difficult. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All approved. Passes. It says next planning board meeting will be March 24th, 2025 at 7 PM. Hearing no other business before us, the meeting is adjourned.